Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and the culture, where we look at all the hot issues of the day from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. We're bringing you a presentation from David Barton at the ProFamily Legislators Conference on a historical and constitutional perspective on all of this chaos that's out there. He actually shared this at the conference for these legislators, and we wanted to bring it to you, our listeners, here on WallBuilders Live. If you missed yesterday, it's available at our website right now at wallbuilderslive.com. But let's jump right in where we left off yesterday. Here's David Barton speaking at the ProFamily Legislators Conference.
The Bill of Rights fully ensures personal privacy against government intrusion unless there's a judicially issued warrant. Yet many governors and mayors order tracking and tracing of American citizens, even forcing restaurants, hotels, and other business establishments to keep a log of customers' names and provide information provided to state and local officials. Washington State directs restaurants to log all eat-in customers in order to reopen. So I've got to report to the government who my customers are when they come into my business? No, that's a real problem. COVID contract listing unfair, say churches. Do you know churches in some states were required to record who came to service and tell the government who came to service? Oh, no. That's not the way this works. Same thing here. Governor orders more contact tracing as cases outpace capacity. And again, remember, the cases are high, the mortality is low. So we're doing things that violate constitutional precepts. We didn't do this for swine flu or for any of the other things that happened, whether it was the Spanish flu or the Hong Kong flu. We didn't do it then. How come we're doing it now on something that has less mortality than nearly every epidemic we've ever had? See, we've given up our rights without even thinking about it. Governor Carney announced a statewide contact tracing plan for COVID-19. So right to privacy is a real problem. Furthermore, many governors, mayors, and similar executive officials have extended emergency powers beyond their intended or designated time allotments and excluded legislatures from the decision-making process in emergency, refusing to allow the legislature to offer any reprieve from their often burdensome policies. Lamont to extend emergency COVID powers. See, this is the thing where definitions are not clear. Texas didn't have a definition of how long our powers should be extended. We just gave the governor power to do things in emergencies. So here we are 9 months later, and he's still making edicts on what's happening. New level restrictions on churches. Even if you're on the stage preaching, you have to wear a mask. You have to wear a mask if you're singing, because churches in Arkansas have now been determined to be the biggest spreader of all coronavirus anywhere in the state. So they've got to have more restrictions than anybody else. No, that ain't the way it works. So even in Arkansas with the Republican governor, you've got this nonsense going on. So extending emergency powers, Governor Phil Scott extends state of emergency. Governor Mills continues state of civil emergency. Governor Whitmer extends state of emergency. Governor Murphy signs executive order extending. So we keep putting this thing longer and longer. Got to put some boundaries around that. You got to say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. And you can't extend it without coming back to us for approval. You cannot extend anything unless we tell you can. Because again, policymaking comes from the people's representatives, not from the governor. It comes from the House. Invaded and restricted many inalienable rights, including the First Amendment's guarantees for freedom of religion. We have abundant evidence of that. I mean, this is why Matt's been so busy for the last 7 months, taking all sorts of cases like this. And also the rights of petition, assembly, speech, along with many other assembly enumerated rights in the Constitution Bill of Rights. Whitmer closes public gathering. Wait a minute, I got a right of assembly. Not this time. I'm telling you, you don't have a right of assembly. Got all sorts of problems. Governor Abbott issues proclamation to limit gatherings. Governor's order statewide shutdown of indoor dining, movie theaters, family entertainment centers. California bans singing in places of worship. On it goes. Police arrest 3 protesters. Now, this is interesting. Arrest 3 protesters, cite another 5 at reopened Hawaii rally in front of the state capitol. First Amendment, I have a right peaceably to assemble and petition government for redress of grievances. I'm peaceably assembling. I'm petitioning the government for redress of grievances. I'm getting arrested for exercising an explicit First Amendment constitutional right. They don't do that with protesters. They assemble in massive numbers, and the police are given stand-down orders. Can't do that. That's not equal treatment.
Quick break, friends. We'll be right back, and we'll jump right back into David Barton's presentation. Stay with us on WallBuilders Live.
This is Tim Barton from WallBuilders with another moment from American history. American patriot Paul Revere rode to alert Americans of the impending arrival of the British, but he also sought patriot leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock to warn them that the British were seeking their execution. Adams and Hancock were staying with the Reverend Jonas Clark in Lexington. When they asked Pastor Clark if his church was ready for the approaching British, he replied, "I've trained them for this very hour. They will fight, and if need be, die under the shadow of the house of God." Later that morning, 70 men from his church faced several hundred British in the first battle of the War for Independence. As Pastor Clark affirmed, the militia that morning were the same who filled the pews of the church meeting house on the Sunday morning before. The American church was regularly at the forefront of the fight for liberty. For more information on this pastor and other colonial patriots, go to WallBuilders.com.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us today. We're going to dive right back into David Barton's presentation on a historical and constitutional perspective on the COVID crisis.
Reopened protesters in North Carolina converge outside the legislative building. 4 arrested. Anti-mask protests at West Virginia Capitol shut down. 32 protesters arrested during reopened California rally at Capitol. Again, I have the right to peaceably assemble and petition government for redress of grievances, right out of the First Amendment. Ignored the inalienable natural right of individuals to work, earn a living, and provide for their family, instead seizing control of businesses and the free markets and cutting off our trade with all parts of the world and the rest of the states and nation, thus shutting the private sector and destroying the public economy. We've seen the free market go down under this thing. Now, here's where it gets fun in the Declaration. Remember the Declaration, 161 words, 6 principles. 3 of those principles were real simple. There's a divine creator. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator. So there is a creator. Second is the creator gives natural and inalienable rights, that we're endowed with our creator with certain inalienable rights. And then it says that to secure these rights, government is instituted among men. So there's a creator who gives us rights, and government exists to protect those rights. That's the 3 principles out of the Declaration. Okay, so what are our natural rights? I told you founding fathers identified about 2 dozen. There's about 18, 19 in the Bill of Rights. Let me show you another one. Jefferson, in his first inaugural address, has a little paragraph here that's pretty interesting. In his first inaugural address, Thomas Jefferson says, after acknowledging and adoring an overruling providence. Now, that's interesting. He starts with God first, which is what the Declaration did. There is a creator. He says, after acknowledging and adoring an overruling providence, what more is necessary to make us a happy and a prosperous people? So after acknowledging God, what's the next thing we have to do to be happy and prosperous? He says, still one thing more, a wise and frugal government, which shall leave us free to regulate our own pursuits of industry and improvement. Oh, that's interesting. Keep going. He says, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government. Now, they considered that to be an inalienable right, the right to work. Matter of fact, Jefferson followed it up. He said, the pillars of our prosperity are the most thriving when left most free to individual enterprise. See, the actual definition of free market back in the 60s was economics that is free from any government regulation. Any government regulation. That is why it was called the free market. Now, we don't use that definition today, but that was the definition of free market a few decades ago. Free market means it's free from government regulation. So we had a free market because that was considered an inalienable right. It's interesting. He says, when left most free, Ben Franklin said it this way. He said, there cannot be a stronger natural right. Now, natural right's an inalienable right. There cannot be a stronger inalienable right than that of man's making the best profit he can. A free market is the means, under God, of establishing the freedom of our country entire and handing it down complete to posterity. See, the founders go through and say, the right to work, the right to have a job, you don't get a guarantee to have a job, but the right to work at your job is a God-given right, and government can't interfere with that. This is a biblical precept. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, if you don't provide for your own household, you're worse than an infidel and you've denied the faith. So for government to come in and tell me I can't provide for my own household, you're making me violate the Bible. Because the Bible says I'm supposed to provide for my own household, and if I don't, I'm worse than an infidel. I mean, that's a strong verse. And government's not supposed to interfere with my free exercise of religion, which includes my right to earn a living for my family. So this is another inalienable right that would never have been tolerated in previous generations. As you look at the inalienable rights are there, the right to work your job, free enterprise. And yet what we see, governor orders thousands of businesses to shut down over virus. New order for New York businesses, reduce on-site workforce by 50%. More businesses shut down with Tony Evers' month-long safer at home order amid COVID-19. Governor Reynolds orders additional businesses shut down over COVID-19. All free market problems. government can't regulate the free market. That's an inalienable right, was the right to be able to provide a living. So that's another problem. Then here's another grievance. The governors held themselves above and free from the heavy rules they imposed on citizens, thus transforming America from a government of laws, not of men, into a government of men, not of laws. Whitmer skirted her own executive orders twice before blowing them up. She got caught twice, so she'll just get rid of them. How crazy. I want you to do them, but when I get caught doing them, I'm going to get rid of them rather than me stop doing them. It's just stupid stuff. New Jersey Governor Murphy broke his own order marching in protest, stay-at-home order, except there's a protest going on, so I'm not going to stay at home. Nancy Pelosi was filmed breaking San Francisco's COVID-19 rules by getting her hair done indoors without a mask. Remember, they shut down all hair salons. You have to wear a mask. Not me. That doesn't apply to me. So I'll find a hair salon, make sure it's open for me. It's just amazing. New York mayor confronted after breaking stay-at-home rules by walking 11 miles from home in an overcrowded park. Murphy was spotted with ousted former aide during COVID exposure. Interesting. He shut down all the restaurants. He took a former aide and went across the border into a nearby state that had not shut down restaurants so he could go over there and eat. It's fine for me to go eat at a restaurant, but I'm not going to let any restaurant. Okay, got it. Valerie Winery's ordered to close indoor operations while Governor's Winery still remains open. Uh-oh. Yeah, but we got headlines like this all over the country. It's double standard kind of stuff. Usurped the private practice of medicine subjected to purely political controls, forbidding potentially life-saving diagnostic surgery, such as for cancer detection, biopsies, mastectomy for breast cancer, cardiovascular surgery, orthopedic surgical procedures, organ donations, transplants, other medical procedures. So your elective surgery be canceled. It's for everyone's good. Study, pandemic halts, delays 28 million elective surgeries, including cancer surgery, head and neck surgeries, urology surgeries, orthopedic surgery. You can't. I mean, again, we're back to this public medicine versus private medicine. Erected a swarm of new offices, sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people, like we have sent thousands in Texas. Tracers, we have thousands going in Illinois. We have unlimited number, an army, I like that phrase, an army of officials in Massachusetts. So that's exactly what the Founding Fathers complained about. Let's see. Ignored the fundamental right of parents to direct education, upbringing their children. We looked at that. Here's some of the headlines that go with this. A Kentucky family of 7 didn't practice social distancing. Now Child Services is investigating the parents for abuse. What? In my home? If I take my 7 kids out, I've got to keep them all apart from each other? No. That's not safety stuff. We keep our kids together when we're in public and when we're at home, whatever. Tennessee ordering at-home well-being checks on every child in the state. Oh, great. Send an official into my home to check my kids? Every home in the state? Where's the probable cause that goes with this? Massachusetts officials called Child Protective Services on parents whose kids miss Zoom school. No, it's the right of parents to direct the education upbringing their kids. If they want to homeschool, that's fine. If they miss Zoom school, so what? That you don't own the kids. I felt violated. You may have seen this one. Kid was on online school, had a BB gun in the background, sent officials into his home because he had a BB gun in the background. And guess what? He has a right to keep and bear arms. That is not limited. There's no right given that's an inalienable right that's limited by age. I don't get the right to express my religion once I become 18. I can't express it before I'm 18? Yes, I can. I don't have the right to free speech till I'm 18. No. All those rights are inalienable rights. They apply to every person.
We're going to take a quick break, folks. You've been listening to David Barton speaking at the ProFamily Legislators Conference, and we will dive right back into his presentation when we return. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution, but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty in Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com. We're back to our WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Let's jump right back into David Barton's presentation on a historical and constitutional perspective of the COVID crisis.
Salon owner says Child Protective Services went to her home when she reopened business and defied the lockdown order. We're going to persecute you. You opened the business, we told you not to. We're going to start invading your home and having inspection. Crazy stuff all over the nation. Losing parental rights to COVID-19. A man's home is his castle. Lots of others I could go to. I'm going to get the final concluding part. I want to have a kind of interesting maybe challenge here. It's the final part of the what do we do now kind of clause. Committing ourselves to the support of the principles set forth in our constitutions enumerated in this document with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor, and will seek to enact measures that will reset our state government and restore an adherence to core constitutional principles by statutorily providing better definitions, limitations, and enforcements in order to reestablish the constitutional doctrines of separation of powers, limited government, due process, federalism, and free markets, as well as increasing basic constitutional training for government employees, especially in law enforcement agencies. Now, let me show you why I took this last one. One of the things that has stood out to me in the last 9 months is what's happening with police and sheriffs. Police and sheriffs, let me give you some headlines just on police. Mississippi police issue $500 tickets to drive-in church service attendees. If you went to church, you got a $500 ticket. If I was a cop, there's no way I issue that ticket because I know the First Amendment. And I know the First Amendment guarantees the free exercise of religion, and there's no way I'm going to do anything that the mayor tells me to if it violates what the Constitution says. Notice what else. Woman handcuffed, cited while praying outside New York City Planned Parenthood the same week of the George Floyd protest. They can do it, but you can't do it. If they've got the right to assemble, you've got the right to assemble. They want to do it for violence. They want to tear down stuff, burn 1,500 businesses in Minneapolis. You're just doing it outside. There's no way I'm going to arrest you because I know you have a right to assemble and to petition. Same thing, Texas cops use undercover sting operation to arrest woman offering salon services. Undercover sting for salon service? Really? I would be embarrassed to be a cop and be part of that. I don't care what the mayor told me to do. I would be embarrassed to be part of that. That's such a blatant violation. What Constitution? Police ordered to arrest gym owners in New Jersey who refused to close their doors. Again, going back to free enterprise. Florida couple arrested for breaking COVID-19 quarantine declared an immediate danger. This one's personal. David Benham arrested for pro-life counseling outside abortion clinic. We maintain social distance. The mayor of Charlotte said, you can't meet in public unless it's in groups of less than 10 and unless you're 6 feet apart. So David Benham went to an abortion clinic. They took chalk and marked out 10-foot spaces on it, and they took 8 people. They're under the 10, and they're 6 feet apart. They're 10 feet apart, and they still got arrested. They completely followed the orders, which could be argued were bad orders, by the mayor, and still got arrested because the mayor was pro-abortion. I'm not going to arrest somebody just because you're pro-abortion when they did everything you told them they have to do. Just because you don't like what they're doing doesn't mean they don't have the right to do it. You have the same thing. Chicago mayor mounts police raid on Sunday church services. I would not want to be a cop who raided a church on a Sunday service. San Francisco police issue first citation for violating stay-at-home order to abortion protester. They didn't get the protesters for stay-at-home orders. They got an 86-year-old woman who left her home to go protest an abortion clinic. That's who they arrested, not the violent protesters. So what I'm seeing with cops is not a good tendency in the headlines when you see this stuff. Whatever the mayor or governor tells me to do, I'm going to do. Doesn't work. By the way, sheriffs, a little different here. Nevada defends cap on church services. Sheriff won't enforce it. The Nevada governor said, we're going to limit the amount of church services. Said, we're not going to enforce that. That's an unconstitutional act. You can't interfere with the free exercise of religion. 4 Michigan sheriffs say they won't strictly enforce Whitmer's stay-at-home order. Knox County Sheriff Tom Spangler questions the constitutionality of COVID-19 mask order. Growing number of Texas sheriffs refuse to enforce governor's mask requirement. Colorado County Sheriff says he'll refuse to enforce proposed red flag gun law. That's a violation of the Second Amendment. I'm not going to enforce that. Nye County Sheriff refuses to enforce new gun background check law, violation of the Second Amendment. Washington State, at least 20 county sheriffs refuse to enforce new gun laws. New York State sheriffs say no to legalize marijuana. The state may have legalized it. It's still a federal crime. We're not doing it. Why is it that when you look at sheriffs, there's a real difference between the yes and no stuff? I mean, the police say, yes, if that's what you tell us to do, we're going to do it. And the sheriffs say, no, that's not constitutional. See, what appears to me is we ought to consider doing some type of constitutional training for law enforcement officers. You need police officers who will push back against things. Let me take you to a Supreme Court. By the way, Emperor Trajan, back in the early part of the Roman Empire, he said to his army, I'm giving you a sword. He said, use this sword against my enemies if I give righteous commands. But if I give unrighteous commands, use this sword against me. That's what the Constitution's there for. That's why we have the Constitution. We're supposed to judge it not by what our leaders tell us, but by what the Constitution tells us. So that's called the Lesser Magistrate Doctrine.
All right, quick break, folks. That was David Barton you were listening to, and we'll come right back to him. He's given a presentation at the ProFamily Legislators Conference on a historical and constitutional perspective on the COVID crisis. Stay with us. We'll be right back on WallBuilders Live.
Hey guys, we want to let you know about a new resource we have here at WallBuilders called The American Story. For years, people have been asking us to do a history book, and we've finally done it. We start with Christopher Columbus and go roughly through Abraham Lincoln, and one of the things that so often we hear today are about the imperfections of America, or how so many people in America that used to be celebrated or honored really aren't good or honorable people. One of the things we acknowledge quickly in the book is that the entire world is full of people who are sinful and need a Savior, because the Bible even tells us that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And yet what we see through history, and certainly is evident in America, is how a perfect God uses imperfect people and does great things through them. The story of America is not the story of perfect people, but you see time and time again how God got involved in the process and used these imperfect people to do great things that impacted the entire world from America. To find out more, go to wallbuilders.com and check out The American Story.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Although education has remained an emphasis in America for nearly 200 years, what has changed the most over that period of time is the philosophy of education. For example, while religion finds no place of refuge in our schools today, such was not the case at the time of our founding fathers. In fact, when the Delaware Indian chiefs brought their youth to be trained in America's schools, on June the 12th, 1779, George Washington told them, "You do well to wish to learn our arts and our way of life, and above all, the religion of Jesus Christ. These will make you a greater and happier people than you are. Congress will do everything they can to assist you in this wise intention." According to George Washington, what students learned above all in American education at the time of the Founding Fathers was the religion of Jesus Christ.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
We're back on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us today. David Barton giving a presentation at the ProFamily Legislators Conference just a few weeks ago. Let's jump right back in where we left off before the break.
Legislative Magistrate Doctrine is something that is talked about by a number of founding fathers. For example, Supreme Court Justice Bushrod Washington said this. He said, "No military or civil officer can command an inferior to violate the laws of this country, nor will such command excuse, much less justify the act." If it's unconstitutional, I don't care if you're a cop, you don't do it. It doesn't matter who told you to do it. You don't do unconstitutional things. You have in a Supreme Court case, 1851, Mitchell versus Harmony, if an order was given to do an illegal act, it can afford no justification to the person by whom it is executed. It can never be maintained that an officer can justify himself for doing an unlawful act by producing the order of his superior. The order may palliate, but it cannot justify that act. You have Justice Robert Jackson, who used that entire philosophy in the war crime trials in Nuremberg. Well, we just did what we were told. Hitler told us to. No, that's not a legally good premise. And somehow we've got to get people understanding the Constitution better. We used to teach it in school. We don't anymore. Only 1 out of 1,000 Americans can name the freedoms in the First Amendment. You can't defend what you don't know. And we're not teaching Constitution. Did you know only 24% of Americans can name the 3 branches of government? How do you preserve separation of powers if you can't? Schools are doing a lousy job of teaching it. So we may have to step in and say, okay, we're going to do some Constitution training. You might consider a law that says Any law enforcement official anywhere in the state has to go through a basic Constitution class, some class, whatever that is. We have Constitution Day that we're supposed to celebrate in schools. Federal law says that any school that receives federal funds has to celebrate Constitution Day. Currently, 90% of public schools do not celebrate Constitution Day, despite federal law. So we just don't even know it. Even when we're trying to teach the Constitution, creating federal laws, there's got to be something that goes a little deeper. So let me just throw at you the thought of maybe starting some constitutional training for law enforcement guys. That becomes really important if it comes to a time of genuine crisis. So that Doctrine of Lesser Magistrate, it's an old doctrine. It goes back to about the 1500s. It came out of the Reformation when you had state-established church in Germany telling Christians what they would do. And a lot of Christian officials said, nope, that's not right. Government can't tell you what to do with your faith. We're not going to enforce that. So that's where you had officials start standing up for the people, and they became the intermediaries. Sheriffs seem to be getting it. Not every sheriff, of course. Not every police is bad. I'm not suggesting that. But just in general, that seems to be a difference between the two.
All right, friends, that was the conclusion of David Barton speaking at the ProFamily Legislators Conference on the topic of a historical and constitutional perspective on the COVID crisis. If you just tuned in with us today, maybe you tuned in the middle and you missed the beginning of the program, or maybe you missed some of the programs earlier this week, it's been a 5-part series. So all 5 parts are now available at our website, WallBuildersLive.com. While you're on the website, I hope you'll consider making a one-time or monthly contribution to WallBuilders Live. That will amplify our voice. We'll be able to speak this truth to even more people and save our constitutional republic. Hope you'll consider that today at WallBuildersLive.com. Hope you enjoyed this 5-part series, and we really do appreciate you listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand under